Okay, here we are, take 2. Can you hear me now? Here we are. Let's try this again. I might, is that really blurry? How's it coming across on the screen? Hi, Donna. We're going to try this again. I've pulled myself together. My husband has helped me get back set up. She can hear me. Donna, how's the picture look? Okay, my husband says it's clear because on my screen, it looks really out of focus and blurry. So I won't worry about that. As long as you guys say it's okay, then I'm going to go with it. I might, doing my chat. Hi, Ruth. Hi, Donna. I might open up some blinds. Give me 1 second. Let me get the lighting just right. When you're live during the day, it definitely changes it just a little bit. And no, that's fine. Okay, I'm adding a little bit of light here and there. It's this light over here that's shining over here, but it'll be fine once we start. So, okay, Ruth says she can see it clearly. Hi, Catherine. How are you? Good. Everybody says everything looks good. Here's what happened. Besides all the technical difficulties this morning, I am so sorry that I'm late. If you were on 10 minutes ago, it was a disaster. We lost power last night and it was out until just about an hour ago. And I didn't think that I would be able to go live. So long story, kind of threw everything out of whack, threw me out of whack. I'm driving my husband crazy. He might go out and go out on the lake boating by the time I'm done because I was so discombobulated. But now we've pulled ourselves together. So here's what happened. Our good friend Bonnie received her very first set of Copic markers yesterday. She kind of picked and chose based on some recommendations from other crafters. And she said, well, now what do I do? And my first reaction was, go watch my sister Melissa made too, because she is really the professional kind of Copic alcohol ink marker colorer in the family. And she's who taught me. And she's taught online classes. She is published in books. And I will be honest, I'm always very honest. And I say that I am not a professional. I kind of fake it till I make it. I tend to overcolor and then put down too much color. Then I have to go back and fix things. And to be honest, it's just because I don't color every day a lot to get a lot of practice in. However, these are some cards that I've created and I do what I need to do and I get the job done and I'm happy with the result. And so that's why I'm here. I'm here from one, not professional, to maybe help beginners with some just basic beginner information, tips and tricks kinds of things. I highly recommend one resource, obviously, is YouTube, and I'm sure there's a million beginning Copic classes out there and with tips and tricks, and maybe they might even be more helpful than I am. But you know, we spend a lot of time together and I know you guys kind of trust what I'm sharing and that I try not to steer you wrong and I try to be very honest. And so, you know, that's why I'm on this morning. So that's my disclaimer. So if someone else watches this who is like a full-time colorer and they want to argue with me or say I didn't do something right, you know, I get that. But like I said, this is just what I have learned over the last few years in Copic coloring. And Copics are not the only alcohol markers out there. There are many companies that sell their own kind of alcohol ink markers. I do think you'll find some are better than others. And Copics for a long, long time have been kind of the go-to. And I'm going to be very honest right now. I'm using Copics today. There is a new marker, alcohol ink marker being released called Olo. I think that's how you pronounce it. I don't think it's Alo. And I will not be receiving those until July. They have not been released to the market yet, but they are supposed to be fantastic. And that was my birthday present from my husband, is the initial release of the Olo markers. My friend Joy Wilson tried them at Creativation, and she came back and she sold me on them, and she bought them, and I have bought them now. But right now we're using Copics, and that's what I'll be using today and talking about that. Let's start first off. And like I said, this is for beginners. So I might be going over information that you're like, oh, really? Come on. This is for very beginners, initial kinds of off the top of my head information that you will need to know. First of all, paper is very, very important in Copic coloring or alcohol ink coloring. You need a very good quality paper that has, I'm not sure what they would say about the weave of the paper, but basically alcohol ink spreads, and that's what creates a beautiful blend in your colors. They have to the alcohol has to work through the paper fibers, and then the colors will blend together. So here are the top kind of papers that I use, and that I know within the crafting industry, a lot of people like to use. Hammermill 100 pound, it's got the chameleon on the front, is a go-to for many, many people. I normally don't use it, but I have used it in the past, and it is fantastic, and a lot of people use it. It also works great in a glimmer machine. So Hammermill, got the chameleon on it. Look for the chameleon, 100 pound, and I know a lot of people are having a problem finding it right now. There's like a paper shortage or something. So look for the Hammermill paper, okay? Or the traditional kind of go-to in Copic coloring is the Copic Express-It. It's called Express-It blending card. And it is a beautiful cardstock. And I will tell you, this is super, super bright white. It almost has a blue tinge to it, but you won't notice it like once you're done coloring or whatever. Traditionally, this is what I have used. But I will tell you, I also lately have been using my Catherine Pooler cardstock, 100 pound bright white cardstock. You can buy it from Catherine Pooler or other stores that sell Catherine Pooler. And this is a fantastic cardstock for coloring. And to be honest, it is what I've been using lately. But I will go back and forth between all three, and it would be just fine. So that's good cardstocks to use. That's very, very important to know. The next one is Bonnie's saying she can't chat. So if someone can give her help, I see her on my phone saying I can't chat. And this was really to help Bonnie as a beginner Copic colorer. And I did tell her to switch to her desktop or a laptop. So if someone can help her out and maybe give her some ideas on how to chat, I'm not a pro at that. So I can't really help her a lot with that. I will tell you, you have to be, now let's talk about inks and alcohol ink markers. My go-to is, oh, there she goes. She had to use her laptop. So there we go. That worked. Yay, Bonnie, I can see you. My go-to is always Memento ink. And I will tell you, this is Catherine Pooler cardstock, by the way, that I've got right here. Memento ink for me is hands down the best black ink I have ever used to work well with alcohol ink markers. I am going to be very, very honest. Any other black ink, dye-based ink that I have ever tried has smeared with alcohol ink markers. My personal experience. I will tell you, a lot of people will say, oh, it'll work if you heat set it. I try heat setting it, and I still normally heat set even my Memento. But a lot of dye-based black ink will smear when you use Copic markers or alcohol ink markers. Be very careful. Do not use a pigment-based ink when you're using an alcohol ink marker. It will dissolve, and it will ruin the nibs of your alcohol markers. And so stick to a dye-based ink, but I will tell you Memento is my go-to. I do keep a re-inker for my Memento Tuxedo black ink pad so that I can re-ink it and get a nice crisp black line. I will tell you, my friend Joy Wilson has recently become a huge fan of Maker Forte black ink, and she tells me that it does not smear. She swears up and down to me that it does not smear with an alcohol ink marker. I have not tried it. Memento is my go-to. So let's go ahead and let me see if I can find, I've been using my blocks for all kinds of other things. So let me get one here behind me. And now they're sticking together because I didn't clean them off. These are all the things. Do as I say, not as I do. So I have this block. Let me pull this stamp off. I didn't even clean it off. That's what I'm saying. This is me, and this is how I normally craft. Not the tidiest person. So here's what we're going to do. I have pulled out two kinds of sets. Just so you know, Sweet November, who is a sponsor for our Nashville Craft Retreat coming up very, very soon. Sweet November Stamps is a sponsor, and they have a new release today because it's May, and they have a cute new release of photopolymer stamps just today. This is their Merwees set number 1, released, I believe, last year. So I am going to be using this. Here's what you want to do, I believe, when you're starting out. Start with smaller stamps. Little real estate means not a lot of work in ink blending. And if you make mistakes, it's okay. It's okay. No one's going to see them. Here's another thing. I kind of learned and started with my love of flowers. I think flowers are very easy to Copic color because you can get away with just the flicking action, and you'll come out with a beautiful result, and it's very forgiving. Also, because if you use a stamp set, for instance, this one from Altenew, it's actually a layered stamp set, and we will just use an outline. But if you look at their layers, you could even stamp the layers. As long as you use a dye-based ink, you can stamp it and use that as a guide as to where the natural shading might be, and then kind of color over it to practice. But once again, do not use a pigment ink. You can color over a dye-based ink, water-based dye ink, I should say, with alcohol ink markers. So that's kind of a good beginner's tips. If you're not sure about shading or even where to use a darker color, use something that's a guide, or use a picture, something like that. But we're not going to worry that much about shading today. What else was I going to say about beginning markers? Okay, let's talk about this. I'm opening my iPad to make sure I get you information correctly that I had pulled up. Things that I kind of know or have never really mattered that much to me, but it is a very basic beginner information you need to know. Let's talk about especially our Copic markers, because that's what I'm familiar with and how they identify their markers. When you are selecting a color, for instance, this is the RV hue. RV is the hue. That's basically the color family. It's a red violet. They are identified based on the color wheel. So this is a red violet family I have just sitting on my desk. RV is the hue. That's the color family. Then you'll see numbers that go, and you might even have 4 numbers. You might have, for instance, a BG quadruple 0. And what this means is that the numbers are, like, for instance, the first number represents, let me get this right, the degree of saturation. So if you have a 0 here, if I had an RV 0, it would have very little color or saturation to it. So then it would go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. A 9 would be heavily saturated. It would be a much kind of darker color, right? So 0 is going to have very little color. And if you had a 9, it would be the darkest or heaviest color in that group. Okay. So then the last number is the brightness, or how transparent. Am I getting this right? Let me make sure I'm getting this right. Yes, I think so. And like I said, I'm not a professional. I just know how it works now, and I just kind of go with it. So this is like the brightness of the color. So a darker, a number like a 9, it means it's going to be a much darker color. Okay, so an RV00, or if we had like a BG quadruple 0, obviously that's going to put down very little color, just a hint of color. And that's how the coloring system works. Now, if you want, and everybody, you know, lots of times people know this and they learn it, but let me think how I want to say this. A very simple trick for beginners, and I think every beginner kind of learns this quickly, is you want to skip and kind of go odd or even numbers. So for instance, if you look at the colors that I have here, I do have an RV13 and an RV14 because they do kind of jump, but a lot of times you would want to go with a 15, go with a 13, a 15, a 17, a 19. And normally a good rule of thumb is to start out with 3 colors. And then if you wanted to work your way up to 4 or even more, that's fine. But as a beginner, even pick just 2 or 3. And so here, for instance, is an RV10. Obviously, it's going to be a very light color. Okay. And then I don't believe there's an RV12. Let me look in my, sorry, I hit my microphone. I'm looking to see what I have here in RVs. There is an RV quadruple 0. Obviously, it's almost no color at all. It's basically just to put down a base layer, okay? So that's an RV quadruple 0. And then here's an example of what a beginner may start out with. If you look, here is an RV02, a 04, and a 06. My 06 is dried out, and that's why normally I do grab these for a lot of coloring. And that would be a good starting point for a beginner. Okay, so this one would be your lightest color, the RV02. This would be a medium color, your RV04. And then the darkest color that you're putting down, like in the shaded areas, would be an RV06. And this would make a beautiful blend together. That is a fantastic starting point for a beginner. So you always want to kind of skip one. And that's a good rule of thumb. Now, obviously, as you become more of an expert, then you kind of start playing with things, and you will pick many different colors that work together. Once again, we are keeping in mind a beginner. This is very, very beginner basic information. Now, I will tell you also, I have this hex chart from Sandy Allnock. And if you go to sandyallnock.com/hex chart, you can, it's very inexpensive, but you can purchase this hex chart and download it. And it gives you a different way to look at your Copic markers. She kind of connects them. And the whole idea is if you use colors that are connected, they will always look good, even down like in a row this way or touching in some way, they will look good together. And I refer to this chart a lot. So I will tell you, I do use that. But as the beginner, a good rule of thumb is staying within the same kind of group, like an RB02, 04, 06, and you'll not go wrong. There are some kind of anomalies that don't work quite that well in the Copic kind of color way of doing things, but that's a good rule of thumb, especially as a beginner. So, and I see my RV06, I can't even find that lid for it. It fell out. So there we go. So that's like very basics with that. Talked about color chart. We've talked about inks. We've talked about paper. So I'm going to start with, here's how we should start. The very, very first basic kind of practice thing as a Copic colorer. And I'm going to start with some greens. Let's do a, just because people like greens, let's do a G03, 05, and 07, and I'll even pull in a 09 so that you can see this. I normally tend to work with the yellow greens if I'm coloring flowers, but this is basically what I just told you to do, okay? So if we start, and we could even start with a 00, because there is no 01, but 00, see how it's the lightest, and it goes lightest to darkest. Okay, so we would have a 00, 03, 05, 07, 09. So I'm going to, just so it shows up right now, I'm going to start with a 05. Here's the first thing that a beginner should just practice doing. First of all, you have two ends to a basic Copic marker. You have your brush nib, and then you have a chisel tip. I don't think I've ever used a chisel tip. It's kind of a waste for me. Okay, and then you will notice also as a beginner thing, first of all, I will tell you also, these are the sketch markers. I started out with the Chows, which are smaller, rounder, they're a little bit cheaper. I quickly went to these sketch markers because they're flat, they won't roll on your table, but also the color number is at the top. And on the Chows, hey, Wendy Jean, on the Chows, you cannot see the number, it's only a colored lid. I couldn't stand that. So I quickly switched from the Chows once I really started coloring to the sketch markers. Just my opinion. Now, you will also notice this little gray kind of band here. That shows me that always that's the chisel tip. So when I'm looking at my marker quickly, I won't pull this lid off of the chisel. I always know this is the brush nib. And you always want to make sure that you put your lid on tight and you hear the snap, or else they will dry out. Okay, and I am not going to talk about refilling or any of that today. That's just not what we're doing today, because as a very beginner, you shouldn't have to do that for a while. So here's my brush nib. This is what I always use. The very first thing you should know as a beginner is how to flick. So find a comfortable way to hold your marker, whether it's like this or like this. And you are going to, I kind of hold it at a 45-degree angle so that it's, if you hold it straight up and down, you'll get a fine point. Don't push too hard. Obviously, it's just the point of your marker, straight up and down. So the more you turn it, the more broad and flat your stroke will be. And the very first thing you should practice is a flick. Push it down and flick, kind of at a 45-degree angle. Okay, and you'll start to figure out what's comfortable for you. Flick. You're just flicking, putting it down on the paper and then picking it up as you go. That's a flick. Donna says, buy additional brush nibs and replace the chisel nibs. You will then have either end to use. Yes, Donna, you can do that. But like I said, I'm switching to the Olo markers most likely. And the cool thing about Olos is you can customize them and you can get a brush nib on both ends. So there's all kinds of things about the Olo markers that I'm not going into today, but that convinced me to purchase those. But I'm not talking about that today. Let's just keep it here with the Copics. So the very first thing you should do, and you can do longer strokes, just practice doing strokes. Practice doing short strokes, medium strokes. And that's the very first lesson you should do, is just flicking. Flick, flick, flick. And then start going in a row like this. See that? Just start flicking. So very beginner kind of information. Now, here's the next thing you want to know about alcohol ink markers. This is wet. The more ink that you put down on your paper, the wetter the paper is going to be. You want, no, Bonnie, I don't. Bonnie wants to know if you get high off the smell. No, I don't. Now, I will tell you another little tip for beginning colorers, and especially me, you tend to be very kind of heavy handed. And I am going to open up another window because now it's looking a little darker in my screen. Give me just a second. We'll see if we like this better. And I might even end up turning off some lights overhead. The camera just suggests, there we go, I like that better. So here's what happens. You're putting down a base layer of ink. And like I said, it has to spread into the fibers of the paper. You want to keep, usually, not always, once you start coloring more, you may not want this. But most of the time you want to create a wet layer, because that's how the different colors will blend and create a really beautiful blend. So you need to work somewhat quickly while your paper's wet and move from your colors. And I will tell you, this is how I do it most of the time. I will start out with the lightest color and put down a base layer. Now, some people will put down a base layer and that just gives us ink on the paper, right? See how light that color is? That's the 00. That's wet. Some people will automatically go to the darkest color. I normally go to the next color, 03. And right now I'm going to flick right over the lighter color. You normally wouldn't always do that, and that blends it together. See that, how it changed it? Okay, and then I would go to the next color, a 05. Not everybody does this. Flick, 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 while it's wet down there. Now, do you see? I don't know if you can see it. Here's actually where the 00 ended. Here's the 03 flick, and here's the 05 flick. Because in most scenes or pictures that you're coloring, what makes Copic markers fantastic is the depth of lights and darks and shading. That's what creates a beautiful scene, is the lights and darks and shading of it all. So obviously, as we go darker, our flicks normally get smaller because you want less of an area in the darkest color. So there's just a very quick beginner, and you see how I layered the color. I tend to go lightest to darkest. Some people do not do that. And once you get better and better, you might find that sometimes now because here's what happens. I get to my darkest, and then I don't know if you can see it, but the alcohol gets so saturated that it actually kind of mutes that color a little bit, kind of washes it out. So then if I went back down from a 07 to 05 and tried to get a better blend, it would really wash out the darker color. And then I tend to go back with the darkest color at the end to really get that in. That's what I call why I think sometimes I'm heavy-handed, and I'm not as good as someone like Jennifer Dove, or I think it's Mindy Egan might be the one I'm thinking. There's several people out there. My sister, Faye Wynn Jones. And if you look at the back, this is okay. It will normally bleed through. That's what Copic markers do. But as a tip, sometimes I will put a white piece of copy paper underneath what I'm coloring, because it kind of soaks it up if it goes through, and it helps with some problems of over saturating your paper. So flicks are very, very important. Number one thing you should always do is just practice flicks. So here's the other thing. You can, once you get better, then you can like push a little bit more on the side, and you learn to create dots and little flicks, things like that. And when you feel more comfortable, and sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. And I know my sister has, I think, a beginner's video somewhere in her YouTube history of just doing things like this and creating your own bushes or leaves on a tree. There are all kinds of beginning Copic videos out there on how to do this. I'm just going from the lightest to the darkest. And all it really is, Sandy Allnock is another fantastic artist. It's just about building the color, right? And you have the lights and the darks and things like that. And it just kind of, it's just tricks the eye. It's kind of that pointillism, right? So those are, hi Mariska, how are you? Good morning, good morning. And that's really all it is. It's, and if we had this in a scene and we did this and we spent a little bit more time, looks like a bunch of dots there, but further away, we can make it look a little bit more like an actual kind of shrub in the background or, you know, whatever. But that's as time goes on. But number one practice thing as a beginner, practice your flicks. You need to practice, practice, practice. Okay. So, and then you'll go from lightest to darkest, or put down your lightest, and then you can go from darkest down. It's great weather here too. It's fantastic. It actually got warmer in Tennessee. So let's go ahead and let's look at, what do I want to color here? I'll go ahead and I'm going to use this Altenew set, and it's kind of a bigger image right here, but that's okay. And we aren't going to color all of it because I just wanted to show you, like I said, we're talking about very, very basics in, I'm only going to use part of this flower. So I'm putting it on this color block and I'm using my Memento ink. Let's use a new piece of paper. And remember, if it's a new stamp, I would condition it with my hand or a lint-free rag, something like that. Thank you, Mariska. I said this is very, very basic. It's beginners 101 because our friend Bonnie just received her first batch of Copic markers. And I said, I'll go live and I'll give you some pointers and you can even work along with me and ask me questions. So you can use your Misty if you think, you know, you want to make sure that you get a nice crisp image and you want to stamp it twice. Mine all have stamps in them already, so let's just do this. When you're stamping something, dye-based ink needs to transfer to a paper just like anything else. Give the ink time to transfer from your stamp to your cardstock. That's one reason people many times don't get a nice crisp image. They just aren't patient and they don't give the ink time to transfer. Look how beautiful first time stamp that one did. Not even on a foam pad, right on my desk. Just give the ink time to transfer. Now, this goes back to what I said a minute ago. I still heat set my Memento ink with an embossing gun, a heat gun. It's just kind of something I do from habit because it does set the ink. It makes it dry right away. And then I don't have to go away and leave it. Other companies try to claim that their black ink can be heat set and works perfectly. I have never found another one that works better than Memento. Mariska says she finds it hard to find the right combos to do shadows. I've got Sandy's chart. Sandy's chart can be a little bit confusing, Mariska. I would say initially go with that rule of skipping numbers, like I did on these greens, 0, 0, 0, 3, 0, 5, 0, 7, 0, 9, till you get more comfortable. Because I will tell you, like a standard red kind of combo. Let me show you. Now, this is everyone in the 20s, the R20s group. These are the R20 Copic markers, 20, 22, 24, 27, and 29. This is a classic red combo. A lot of people use it, especially beginners, and I tend to use it all the time. But I will tell you, watch this. And let's go back to this green page. I'm getting off on a tangent here. Let's switch over. I will tell you that I find, let's start with the 24. then even my 29, I'm just going to put down some color here. I'm going in straight lines, bigger flicks, I should say. Flicks are what blends, okay? There's my base color of 24. Then let's go to 27. Here's my 27. There's a 27. Now we'll go to 29. Can you see that? 24, 27, 29. When you're coloring something, let's say Santa's red suit, sometimes you don't feel like 29 is dark enough. It doesn't give me the drama that I want. So if this is a 29, remember, this would be darker. The higher the number, the darker the color. So I might go up by 49, 59, 69. And so here we go. If I go up in my reds and I keep 9 at the end, but I've got an 89 and a 59 here, I know those are darker, more color in them, right? So I have, while this is wet, hopefully, this is the R59. Imagine this is an image. I can start flicking here. There's where my 59, what a beautiful way to really add some dramatic color. This is 89. Ooh, my 89 is drying out a little bit. I can feel it as soon as I put it down on paper. Okay. Now, look at that. There's my 24, R27, R29, R59, and look at that R89. See where that, now, I still have lines because I didn't try to blend it, but if you really look at a lot of coloring, don't get upset if you have lines and it's not a perfect blend. You can try to get that. You can put down more and more alcohol ink, but the lines are okay because when it's further away, notice the eye doesn't see that. And it actually sometimes is a really good effect. I like that effect on flowers, actually. The more flicking motion, not as blended. So you will find colorers. What's his name? He colors beautiful MFT images. It's Alberto something. Follow him on Instagram. Beautiful coloring. He tends to use a very dramatic, dark color. Don't look at my fingernails. They look awful. I need to redo them. Dark color to much lighter colors. He uses very dramatic. Alberto Gava, Mariska says. I think that's who it is. He's on Instagram as like, starts with an L. So that's how he gets very dramatic scenes. He is not afraid to go very, very dark in his shading. And it does look fantastic. Okay, so that explains that on really how to jump up. It's a quick, easy way to jump up and kind of fail proof on how to get a real dark shading there. So here's what I do with let's do this with the reds since we're here right now. Or no, let's use these pinks that I've got. I've got the RV10 and that would be my lightest color. Let's put down a base with that. And this is really easy. You can do flicks or you can do circles. Circles will also put down some, for a base layer, lots of times I will do circles. I will even leave white when I'm Copic coloring a flower because light means bright sunlight, right? Now, one thing you can look at is you can try to figure out where the light would be coming as we start to figure out shading. Normally, the easiest way for a beginner is to pretend that the light's coming directly at it. So the lightest areas would be kind of right in here and on the tips of petals and stuff if you're thinking about flowers. Start with that. Don't worry about it. This petal is obviously kind of tilting out, so it would be lighter right here also and darker over here. This one, obviously the light might be shining here if we think about it here in the middle, and a little bit, it's always going to be darker at the base and then lighter kind of up in this area, and especially right here and maybe a little bit darker here. if you aren't sure, you really need a guide. Like I said, Altenew is really good. They actually give you some sort of a layering coloring guide. And if you look at all the layers, it's going to kind of tell you where the darker colors might be on a normal flower or where they envision them in the stamp. So that's always something to kind of look at to get an idea. So I will almost always start with a lighter color and flick, 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 flick. Sometimes I leave white because I like it, but we won't do it today. I'm going to show you. Watch how easy this is. I'm going right over the lines. I'm not being careful. I don't want to go outside of the lines, but sometimes I do when I'm going really fast. And if I don't get the tips, that's okay too. Did you see how I went in circles? Just to put my base down. I will tend to color one flower at a time because I need to keep that alcohol ink wet. So now if we use the rule of going up in colors, now I'm going to 13 and I'm going to do long flicks because the lighter colors are going to be the lightest. Like it'll go further up on the flower, right? So I'm just doing my flip. This is very simple. I would probably add a lot more to this than what I'm doing now if I were really trying to do this one. But for the ease of a beginner tutorial. And do you see sometimes I make my flicks follow the edge? Follow where I think the petal might be moving naturally. Do you see this? Flick, flick, flick. Here's the other thing. Move your paper, not your hand most of the time. Notice I will move my paper. This might have a little bit of color here. Flick, flick, flick. You can also do a line there and it probably wouldn't mess anything up. See that? Easy flicks. Zero, that's the 13. Now the 14, it changes a little bit. And we don't want to jump from a 13 to a 17. So I am going to add a little bit of this 14 in. I'm going to go back over, but notice these flicks won't be as long as my 13 flicks. Because I want that lighter color to show and I want these darker ones to blend in. And remember, it's an ink. It's going to dry back a little bit. That's the 14. Now we can jump to the 17 and it won't shock our eye as much. It's still 3 jumps, right? It's still 3 jumps. In a perfect world, I'd have a 16. So now we're going to jump. This is much darker. And it's nice when a stamp kind of tells you where the artist was thinking by giving you these little lines, right? This is where starting with flowers is kind of forgiving because the flicks actually look really good. The striations, many times you see in a flower petal, right? So that looks pretty. It looks really good. Okay, so that was the 17. Now we go to the 19. 19 is the darkest color. There's going to be less of that shading. We'll keep it right at the base. And because there's so much ink down, you could follow the petal and it will blend. Only when there's that big layer of ink already down, if I follow some lines, can I put a straight line and not a flick? See that? Now, if I want to blend these lines a little bit more, now see, I like that. That doesn't bother me at all. I do need some more color right here. I missed that. If you want to go back to an RV like 10, the lightest color, and I will go back and kind of flick. I won't go back over this darkest color because it's going to wash it out, but I will go over the wet edge of these other ones and pull that color out like that. Because that's our wet leading edge, right? Should be. Try not to go back over the darkest color again unless you're just trying to blend that in a little bit more so you don't have as many lines. But if you do, you have to know that the more ink you lay down, the more it's going to kind of wash it out. Can you see how that blended it a little bit more? I need to fix this one. I haven't fixed that one. So let's go with our 14. I think that does have a 14. Let's go with a 17 and add a little bit of color. This is getting dangerous because on this edge, there wouldn't be a lot of color there. Now I'll go back with the 14 and pull that out while it's wet. And then the 13. The little flicks help it blend a little bit more. I would pull some out a little bit further so it doesn't look like you have a straight line. And now back over with the 0 and kind of blend that. Sometimes even the circular motion helps that blend easier. There you go. See how that got a really kind of nice blend, especially further away. Up close, it looks more of a line. But remember, the lighter color can help soften if you get a line, a little bit darker color. But remember, here's the thing beginner colors do, and I still do it. See, the back is okay. Is if you put down too much ink, what happens is the alcohol actually will start pushing the darker color. So whereas you want to blend it, you'll get like a washed out splat, like kind of splat looking thing. You have gone way too far. A beginner color, you need to figure out where you've started to put down too much ink, and you have to let it dry and walk away from it, let it dry. Then you can come back and hopefully fix it. So that's a good beginner tip. If you start to see that you put down so much ink and it actually starts to wash it out and you get like a big flat looking thing and it's pushing the darker colors away, you put down too much ink and you need to stop. And this is where having this paper does help that. That's a beginner color kind of mistake. And it will let you come back and fix it when it dries. You've oversaturated the paper. The more you want to blend, the more saturation you do need, but it becomes a fine line, especially in reds and certain colors. So that's a good, now right here, I put down too much dark color, and if I want to soften it, I will go back. It's probably dry now, but I can go back with one of the lighter colors and kind of pull some flicks out. And while that's wet, then I'm going to go down in color and go along the wet edge. And go down. And these are just things, and now I'm going to pull it towards me. Normally, I like to flick away from me, but as you color more, you kind of figure out what works for you and when you do certain things and when you don't. See that one? It blended a little bit better. And now it's going to dry, and it'll dry back a little bit. And if I'm not happy with how it works with all the other colors, I would go back. But that's, I mean, everybody knows they love, love, love Copic coloring. And I will tell you, it is the most eye-catching. People love things that are Copic colored. It's just, they just are drawn to it, and it is really pretty. And you see, it's actually very easy. It's almost easier for me to alcohol ink color this flower than if I took the time to layer up all of my stamped, my stamps. You know, lots of times there's layers to certain stamps. It takes so long to line it up and get it just right. It's almost easier for me to Copic color it, and it's just as beautiful, if not even more beautiful Copic color. So what do you guys think? I have been on now for an hour, and I think that's a really good intro, very basic intro to, excuse me. If you just received alcohol ink markers in the mail, that should get you started. And flowers, I think, are an easy way to start. Stamp an outline and just start practicing. And it does take practice to really figure out how alcohol ink moves and works together. What do you guys think? Ask me questions now, because I'm getting ready to click off of here. Yes, Donna says, Bonnie, practice, 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 practice. Yay. Thank you, Catherine. I'm glad. I'm really glad that this helped. I know lots of you, this is very simple, but it is a very basic intro for you just received some alcohol markers. Where do I begin? Yay. Thank you, Donna. Donna says she loves a Copic color. Okay. Elizabeth said she needed some basics. Fantastic. Oh, let me add this in too. I will tell you, you can heat emboss with an embossing powder and then heat it and color in that. But I would be very, very careful, because some embossing powders, a heat embossed image will dissolve with some alcohol ink markers and it will ruin your nibs. So be careful with that also. I tend to not do that, but you can. I just would try not to color over the heat embossing. Okay. Great. Mariska says she's going to watch it again from the beginning. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Oh, Bonnie says she's got her first 2 flowers done and she's very happy. Good. That's fantastic, Bonnie. So one other stamp, I showed you the Sweet November. If we had had time, I was going to, remember I said, start out with a smaller image because it's more forgiving. Here's the other thing. Things like mermaid tails are kind of like flowers. Hair takes a little bit of practice. So, but remember, like a mermaid, here's the fun thing. It doesn't have to be blondes and browns and darker browns and all the colors and the grays and the blacks with purple hues and things like that. Mermaid hair can be any color you want. And so can any other image, don't get me wrong. But that's why I pulled out mermaids, because and Amy Young's images are kind of sweet and easier to color. It'd be a good practice point, because you can make a mermaid hair red or orange or turquoise or pink or purples or any colors that you want, and it's a-okay, right? Dark browns, you can make them the dark grays with purpley hues. Whatever you want to do, mermaids are a great way to kind of practice. So there you go. Any other questions? Going once. Thank you so much for everybody joining me and sitting through the first debacle that we deleted. This one should stay up on YouTube for future reference. So let me know. You can always send me a comment. Please please subscribe, and then you'll be notified when I do last minute tutorials like this. And I do have edited videos too, if you don't like a live chat. So you guys, thank you so much for joining me. And I will see you soon. Thanks so much. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a great week.